She appears to be a regular mom on social media, but looks can be deceiving. This woman, her sister, and their friend are now accused of hacking another mom to death in broad daylight on a street. And I'll show you the video per Good Citizen on YouTube that shows one of these alleged killers flashing a smile to the camera as she is being taken off to jail for allegedly a bloody and horrific murder. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. We are talking about a bloody crime here, truly horrific, and it was allegedly done in the middle of the day, taking the life of a mom of 5 on a street in Texas. And to make things even more disturbing, the alleged killers, frankly, don't seem fazed by the possibility of spending the rest of their lives in a prison. And in just a moment, you will hear what one of the suspects reportedly said to a camera as police took them into custody. But this is the woman we need to be talking about, the victim in this case, Caroline Pena. Her friends called her Caro. The woman who lost her life on Thursday last week. This is video that she posted earlier this month, appearing to show her heading for a day on the water with her family. Caro was 32 years old, mom to 5, a friend to many, and it's unclear at this point what was going on in her life at the time of her murder, and it's unclear how she came across the 3 women now accused of killing her. And we're going to walk through what police say allegedly happened to Pena on a busy Texas street in broad daylight. But before we get to that, I want to talk about these suspects. So look at this TikTok here. This was posted by one of the girls accused of hacking Pena to death. Her name is Kitty Mia Diaz. She's 21 years old, and she posted this video only a couple weeks ago on June 9th. It's of her and her 4-year-old son, and she is talking about how much she loves and lives for her son. She also posted this days after that where she says, quote, "I've always wondered what it felt like to be loved unconditionally. Now I know what it feels like." And she shows images of her son. And the caption, it says, quote, "My Gigi, the one who saved my life in ways he'll never fully understand. The day he came into my world, he gave me a reason to be stronger, better, and keep pushing forward. Every smile, every hug, every mom reminds me how blessed I am. He is my greatest accomplishment, my biggest motivation, and the piece of my heart that walks outside my body every day, no matter how hard life gets. One look at him makes everything worth it. I love you more than words could ever explain. My sweet baby boy, my Gigi, thank you for saving me, giving me purpose, and showing me a love so pure and unconditional. You will always be my greatest blessing." End quote. And you hear that, and you just wonder how in the world is the person that you see on that TikTok, the same person in the mugshot, now being held for a brutal murder. And here she is alongside her sister and their friend. Now, Kitty Diaz's sister goes by Cookie Diaz. Officially, her name is Amaya Cookie Diaz. She is 19, so she's the younger sister. And then their friend who's also arrested in this case is Kyandra Faz. She's 21. So I'm laying out who they are before we get to the details of what allegedly happened, because you just find it so hard to believe that they would be accused of this crime, and one as horrific as police say took place in Del Rio, Texas last week. Now, Del Rio, it's a border town, and if you have heard it before, that's probably because of immigration news. Police say last week on Thursday, they received a call at 2:10 in the afternoon, and it was because they needed to get to a local hospital. A stabbing victim had arrived, and when officers responded, that is when they found Caro Pena. And she had been stabbed multiple times, and her injuries were so severe that she had to be sent to San Antonio for treatment to try and save her life. So as she is going to San Antonio, police begin investigating this case and trying to figure out what happened. And police say they determined that Pena had been allegedly stabbed on the 800 block of 10th Street in Del Rio. We put that into Google Earth. Here's the image that came out. Just gives you kind of an idea of the type of street where this crime allegedly took place. Pena's friends tell KENS5 television that there were images circulating on social media, they were going viral locally, showing Pena allegedly in this altercation with her attackers. They say the picture showed a blood-stained pink shirt and she was surrounded by 3 women. Now, those images, we haven't been able to see them because they have been taken down from social media. But within 2 hours of Pena arriving at that hospital and police being called in to investigate, and it's unclear how Pena got to the hospital, police made arrests in this case. They arrested Kitty and Cookie Diaz. There's a YouTube account titled Good Citizen in Del Rio, and they captured video of their arrest. This is Kitty Diaz being put into the cruiser. And there is Cookie Diaz smiling. She even makes a comment to the camera. This was around 4 in the afternoon. Caro Pena, about 5 hours later, lost her life. She died around 9 in San Antonio. So this is the 3rd person who has been arrested, allegedly a friend of Cookie and Kitty. Her name is Kyandra Faz. Police have been tight-lipped about this case to this point. They're not giving us much more than what I have been able to tell you. We don't know at this point what sparked the confrontation between Pena and her alleged attackers, if she knew them before the alleged attack. Police have yet to give any sort of possible motive in this case. It is also shocking that this case took place in the middle of the day, and where it took place in the middle of the day. Quote, this wasn't something that happened in a back alley. This happened at the corner near Sonic on one of our busiest roads in broad daylight. That was one of Pena's friends talking to KENS television. Now, according to Fox News, police say that Pena had been stabbed twice in the back and a 3rd time in the stomach. It is unclear which girl allegedly did the stabbing, and if only one of them had a weapon. According to Fox News, the 3 suspects are currently at a correctional facility in Del Rio. Police say they are still gathering evidence. More charges are pending, and they're, quote, trying to determine the full circumstances surrounding this incident. Now, we spoke to the local clerk, and they told us that the suspects at this point, they don't have court dates yet because they haven't been indicted, and that will come from the DA. There's no word yet on a timeline there. Another friend of Pena's told Fox News this about that image allegedly circulating online showing this altercation between Pena and her alleged attackers. Quote, that girl, she was a fighter. She was still standing her ground. This friend also posted this on Facebook saying that Caro tried to call her shortly before that alleged attack took place. Quote, the last picture we took a few days ago, I miss you so much. I'm mad at myself for not being able to answer your last call today at work. God knows why he does things, but I know if I would have been there, none of this would have happened. I love you, B, and you will always be a sister I never had. I'm going to miss calling you at 5:30 a.m. and telling you, B, I need someone to talk to. Your exact words were always, talk to me, B. I'm going to miss you telling me, nah, you don't settle. You're a boss. A B word. I know that if I would have gotten out of work a few minutes earlier, I wouldn't have let you gone down alone. You know that. My heart hurts, B. My kids hurt. You're gone, but not forgotten. Join us now to talk more about this investigation. Retired NYPD Detective David Sarney. Always great to have you here on Law and Crime. So the victim, this mom of 5, and just feel for her family, for her kids. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon that police get the call that she's at the hospital. The arrests that we see in this video now circulating on social media, those happen around 4 o'clock. So it's like roughly 2 hours between the investigation beginning to the arrest being made. What does that tell you as someone who's done these types of investigations?
Well, thank you for having me. It comes back to these cases move fast and very fluid, especially an incident like that. You have a stabbing, you go back to the crime scene where it happened, apparently near that Sonic location or another couple blocks away. You're going to get interviews, video cameras. The thing is, that area seems to be, you can't get around there without vehicles, so there's going to be some sort of video surveillance or video cameras that may have caught a license plate, and then they work from there. It's a very fluid. Detectives move very quickly because you're going to have someone go to the hospital to find out about the victim. Then you have detectives go to the crime scene to look for witnesses, evidence, video, and it moved very quickly to all of a sudden you have a stabbing and then an arrest within 2 hours. It's really good work by them, but this is only part of the case. Just because you have an arrest doesn't necessarily mean that the case is over. You still have to do a lot of work afterwards.
The video that's circulating online of Cookie and Kitty being arrested, it's certainly shocking. You can see why it's making headlines. It's like the New York Post has it, front and center is like, look at these smiling girls doing this. But as far as like the investigation part of it, like when you have a suspect and it's Cookie is the one who jokes like, stop recording, and she's smiling in this video, allegedly, as she's being taken away, like, how does that impact the case that you're building that a prosecutor eventually is going to try?
Well, when we have these calls, we call them perp walks in a sense. This is almost happenstance where the the cops get there and they apprehend the individuals, walk them out. And sometimes that perp walk is important because if the defense attorney says they were sorry, they didn't do this, they seemed very jovial. They thought it wasn't a big deal. That's something that helps you as an investigator because that's another piece to the puzzle that you still have to add everything up, which means you do a victimology to find out if there's any relationship between the victims and the perpetrators involved. And again, you're innocent until proven guilty in the court of law, but there was enough probable cause by the investigators to make these apprehensions. And it comes back to the same thing. Perp walks are essential because it's sometimes you might get something come out, you might have a conversation come out, or they blurt something out. The emotional attitudes that they showed and what they said is so, if you're getting arrested and you act that way, you don't usually see that happen, especially something like this. Cops went to your house, picked you up, and had you walk out, and you act that way. That's damning in the sense that you can't just say they were sorry, they're apologetic. Whatever defense attorney is going to try to throw, that's going to be a good thing to weigh in when it goes to trial, if it does go to trial.
Oh, and before we get back to like the details of the case, I just always like have these moments, and maybe it's from like covering this stuff all the time, where it's like you're looking at someone who, Cookie Diaz, she's 19 years old. If this is a murder case and she is found guilty of murder and she's going to at least spend the rest of her life in prison, obviously Texas has the death penalty. We can talk about that, but like, you just think of the things, it's like you're eating prison food for the rest of your life if you're found guilty. And yet there's kind of this like, and I'm sure you've seen it before. I mean, it's more like, it's not potentially uncommon that people just don't have this like realization that like, it's like whatever you like doing in your life is done other than what's going to be inside of that prison cell if someone like Cookie Diaz is found guilty of murder.
Yeah, I mean, the disconnect people have is amazing. And we're talking about people who are younger, and we're seeing youth crime has been on the rise. We've seen 15 to 17 and 20-year-olds. For some reason, I continually say this, there's a broken compass, a broken morality in these younger people because they don't understand. They get fixed on social media, they get fixed on likes and things like that, and they get a social disconnect where they don't understand like what life's about. What's right and what's wrong, and they kind of that blurs the lines immensely. When I talk about when you deal with kids, you want to teach them structured discipline, right and wrong morality, and somewhere along the line that gets fractured. I don't know where it's coming from, but you involve yourself in a fight, and this is what it's going to be. Apparently, it just because there's some video footage where the victim is being assaulted, and you're okay with that. And not only that, there is a weapon involved where this victim is stabbed, not just once, not twice, but apparently 3 times. We don't know who the perpetrator is stabbing the girl, but everyone is acting in concert. So that's going to be part of the investigation, is who is the actual person stabbed. And if there is, maybe there's more than one. We'll determine that based on the circumstances, because the injuries may be stab wounds. Was there more than one knife involved? Was there more than one perpetrator doing the stabbing? So that's all going to come out with that surveillance video. You're going to conduct search warrants at the locations. You're going to do search warrants on their cell phones, on computers, just to see where they are and if there's any connection between the victim and the perpetrators.
So there was apparently a picture going around social media that's been taken down that like showed part of this dispute that was going on. Apparently there's a Sonic restaurant kind of involved, and there's surveillance cameras there. This is a busy part of, Del Rio is kind of a small town, I think like 35,000 people, but like still like you're gonna have surveillance cameras, things like that are gonna see. So we'll see how all of that comes into play in the investigation. The fact that you have 3 suspects at this point, and there is going to be an image allegedly showing the 3 of them surrounding this victim. How much does it matter if there's only one murder weapon, and we don't know if they have the murder weapon, but who's doing the stabbing and who's just there? Like, how does that impact what the charges could look like?
Well, that would be up to the prosecutor what they're going to pursue. And this is a benefit. This would help the detectives in the interrogation if they have some video footage of this incident. And if there's 1 or 2 or 3 perpetrators involved in the stabbing, because there is sometimes the weakest link, the person who would be considered the least culpable. Then they're going to work on that person to say if they could say what happened. Because, when you deal with these situations, they are in New York State, they're acting in concert. So if one person is involved in that and there are 3 around, that's why it's valuable to have that video, because they can't just say they're just standing around. If they're engaged and assaulting her, they're part and parcel to the murder of this girl too.
And I think of, and it's unclear what their defense is going to be. We don't know the circumstances that led into this altercation, and how it happened and whatever it may be. But according to Fox News, the injuries to Caro Pena, she was stabbed twice in the back and once in the stomach. How does that impact the narrative that you're putting together, if you're a detective in this case, that those were the injuries that ended up taking her life?
Well, that's where you're going to look at the surveillance video and during the interrogations of these girls, because you have to see what happened. And that's why, it comes back to the surveillance video and what they're going to say. And you look at also the perpetrator's hands, because when you do with a stabbing, is there a chance that there was an injury sustained by the perpetrator or perpetrators involved? So these things are all coming into play. Detective's going to sit there. You have them arrested. You're now going to follow up with, now the clock kind of slows a little bit because now you have them in custody. You do your interrogations, and if they lawyer up, then you're going to work on the other facts of the evidence, anything physical that you could find, and also search warrants. What vehicle they transported themselves to and from that location. Was there more than one vehicle? Those are going to get the search warrants. They're going to seize those cars. They're going to do search warrants at the locations to see if there's a murder weapon that's recovered, because we don't know what's recovered at the scene. We just know there was a scene where did they dispose of the knife? Okay, if they dispose of the knife, but we still have good video of that, and if there's witnesses, because it's a small town, so maybe there was people who knew them and said, these are the ones who were involved, and they had things to confirm that information with the video and the witnesses that might have been available there.
Yeah, and that can be huge, because I also think of, like, you have these three people involved. It was lightning quick that they were taken into custody. But say you have one suspect who decides, whichever one it may be, decides that they're going to start saying that the other two were the ones that really did it, and I just happen to be there. We don't know what the surveillance video shows. But if you have witnesses in surveillance video, how does that change kind of the leverage you have on someone who says, hey, I want to talk, I want to cooperate with the investigation? Because it sounds like if you're police, like, you wouldn't really need that person anymore if you want to put all three to be able to be found guilty of murder.
You still want to get all the pieces of the puzzle, because one thing which you want to take, you can't always depend on one piece of evidence. I've seen that before. I've had DNA evidence which has been refuted, and prosecutor would not pursue a case because of just that. We've had one witness ID shootings where the prosecutor wouldn't pursue it because only one witness. So you have to, doesn't matter what you think it is, you have to build that case, that investigation, to determine who was involved. Even the video that's there, that's part of it. So if you get statements made, that adds to it, and that's the whole thing. Because then you hand it to the prosecutor, and then they can make a determination. Because this might be the prosecutor may be in the interrogation room with them. We don't really know how. They don't know how they work in Texas. But as far as the detectives, we're going to do all the work up first before we walk into that room. And if we already know who's involved or who knew that person was the stabber, we usually go to the weakest link. We'll find out who the weakest link is, and we'll talk to them first.
What's your reaction to the fact that, I think of a stabbing murder as just such any murder is a brutal murder. It's kind of a cliche term people use, but like close stabbing, to do it in broad daylight on a street where you're not hiding it, like in a house. It's just, whenever we see these types of cases, just what stands out to you when it's just something that's done so literally out in the open?
The violence is just, to me, it's sad. It's tragic to cities that you would see this happen. And I go back to it, we're seeing younger and younger people doing these things. And I don't know, are they broken? Is there something broken in their head that they think it's okay to do? But as a law enforcement perspective, we're dealing with the crime itself. So it's a violent crime. We're going to deal with it that way. On the social aspect of it, I don't understand. And sometimes we deal with groups. Maybe one person wouldn't have done it, but a group of 2 or 3 would do it. We've seen that with robberies and shootings where one person would do it, but we a group with them. Was that what fueled them? And that's why the evidence that you have prior to walking into the room to speak to all those individuals is important to have, because you don't also walk in cold. You have to make sure you have all your ducks in a row before you walk in that room, because you want to hear what they have to say, their side of the story. Because video doesn't always capture audio, so that way you have what they said. Because, like I said, I'm kind of crazy. I need to know what was in their head when they did what they did.
Because, like, on that note, with jury's going to want to know, like, why they did this allegedly. If it even gets to that point. But at the same time, if there's video evidence showing the act of stabbing someone with a knife twice in the back, once in the stomach, like, do you actually need that motive? I'm sure I feel like they're going to find a motive. It just seems like it's one of those cases where like something had to have happened here for as quickly as it did. But is that something you actually need as you're putting the case together?
You don't always need a motive because the crime itself is that action. If there's some sort of emotional disturbance, that's the reason why detectives have to, look to deal with the possible defenses that a perpetrator would have. So we want to certify that through that investigation. That's why the video surveillance. Now, we know that she was stabbed twice in the back, once in the stomach. Was she stabbed in the stomach first, stabbed in the back twice? That may come out in the video. That also may come out during the interviews. So we can't just depend on that. And I always go back to this. Even though you think you have what you have, there's always a jury that may not believe what you're saying, because we have to support everything. We call the totality of circumstances. It doesn't always get to a motive. I mean, sometimes you get to that why. It's not always there. But with the building of the case, you may get to that why.
And then when it comes to, I know where you worked in New York, there's no death penalty, but in Texas, there certainly is. And you look at this case, I mean, a stabbing, middle of the day, broad daylight, all of that, mother of five. I mean, this is a brutal, brutal crime for sure. They're young. I mean, I don't know how much that actually factors into the decision of whether you go for a death penalty. But when you look at a case like this and what is alleged at this point, there's a lot still that we don't know. Is this something that qualifies typically in states like Texas where that's something that's on the table?
Well, that would be up to the prosecutor to make the determination. And then if they want to make this a death penalty case, and that would be based on the evidence they have to show. If this was an ongoing dispute that ended that way, or was it a happenstance moment in their lives that they all just met up and did that? That's why the detectives have to do that, because that way we can determine whether or not. And we don't do this as an investigator. I don't do that. That's up to the prosecutor to make that determination whether they want to go to death penalty case. But we've seen, in Texas, sentencing is very harsh. It isn't like New York, where you may not get what you think you should be getting as punishment. This is a serious crime, and not just a serious crime. The attitudes during the perp walk are mind-bending. It's just mind-boggling to think that you would walk out in handcuffs by police at your house and act that way. It really says a lot.
It makes zero sense, and the only context to it is that Caro Pena didn't die until hours after that video was shot. But still, I mean, if you allegedly, you are accused of stabbing someone, you are being taken away in handcuffs, and even in that moment, and I'm unclear, the background check that I did, I didn't see any sort of previous criminal history on them. Like, who knows if they have a juvenile record that's still sealed or something like that. But still, like, to even be in that moment and to not recognize the weight of the moment or just laugh in the face of the weight in that moment and the impact it could have on your life, it just never makes sense when we see these. And unfortunately, we have seen people accused of terrible crimes act like this during perp walks before. It just will never make sense. Yeah,
it doesn't. It never makes sense. But you know what it is? I'm an investigator. I'm not a hack psychologist, and that's the thing. I could do what I do is that. If there's going to be a psychological evaluation, let them do it on that end. But that defense is going to be refuted by what the investigators bring to the table to that case, and that's why it's important, because the prosecutor will be a part of the case, but the detectives are the ones who have to get the evidence, because that's what it comes down to. The facts matter. It's not what I feel, what I think. It's what I can prove by what the evidence that I recover from a scene, video, and the like, anything like that.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. We'll see what their side of the story is eventually, if and when that comes out. Retired NYPD Detective David Sarney, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, and stay safe.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.